All right. Episode 9, NC Squared Conspiracy Podcast. My name is Simon.
My name is Chance.
And I'm Chloe. Oh, balls. We should start over.
No, we're good.
No.
We were getting there. We have guests today. We have a full room of people today, actually. There's 5 people in the room.
5 people
It's
in this
kind of
room.
a cool change of dynamics.
It is.
It's going to be interesting.
I hope so.
This is the direction we wanted to move in from the beginning. So,
Well,
yeah, we always wanted to get more people on the
you
show.
wanted to move in that direction.
Well, it's my show.
When did this happen?
I decided it just now.
Fair enough.
I also wanted to move in this direction.
Yeah, the guests wanted to move in this direction.
Well,
Before we get going here, we're going to take a moment to thank all of our supporters on Patron and on YouTube. Not
Facebook.
YouTube, actually. Wherever you listen to our podcast other than YouTube, because it actually doesn't help us at all. So if you listen to them on YouTube, find them somewhere else, because it doesn't help us at all if you listen on YouTube. But mainly thank you to our Patron supporters. They pay for our RSS hosting fees. They pay for our beer. They pay for our pizza. And we have a patron as our guest right now. Chloe, right next to me. Top tier patron. We'll edit in some applause.
oh, that's. I like that.
Should we?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll edit in some applause for sure.
Some real low key applause,
Low,
just for
like
fun.
some golf
Like golf
claps
claps.
in the
exactly.
background. Okay, that's fine. Today we're talking about Big Pharma.
Big Pharma, indeed.
Big Pharma, pharmaceutical companies. And that's why we have Chloe here today. Chloe is an RN.
So it's a little inside knowledge there that me and Simon don't have.
We don't have. We're extremely unknowledgeable on the subject.
It's not my particular conspiracy, but, it's out there.
We're getting into it because we've talked about Monsanto in like every episode recently, and people don't know that Monsanto is actually in the pharmaceutical game as well.
Yep.
Everyone knows Monsanto's a twisted company.
Yep.
They're in it for the money. A lot of pharmaceutical companies are in it for the money,
True.
arguably. That's why we're here.
It's true.
We're going to talk about
true.
that today. It is true. So you want to have a note they want to start off on, or I can keep us going?
I have a small note, I guess.
You guess.
I guess.
Bring it on.
We'll go with it.
Okay.
I take it back. All right, so I guess we'll start off with Big Pharma is the main one, and the conspiracy revolves around profitabilities, suppressing cures, possible cures, that is, and then selling drugs that only treat the problem rather than cure it, because a patient that lives 80 years being treated is significantly more profitable than a patient that gets cured once and then lives a healthy life after that. So
That would be the idea of the conspiracy behind it.
that's the main one. And then the subcategories, I think we're going to talk a little bit about when they release drugs they know have adverse side effects that are either suppressed or get past FDA. And then advertising.
Advertising.
You can't go a day without seeing a drug advertisement, and then all the little stuff, including death, as a side effect. So
That is true.
That's always an interesting one to me. is
Yeah,
that so
that's
many
true.
drugs almost always end with you might die.
Did you know that most countries actually will not allow companies to advertise drugs?
I think there's only 3 in the entire world. Actually, I think it's the U.S.
Here in America, we advertise our drugs.
and our beer.
New
And our beer.
Zealand
That's
is one of them as well.
New Zealand cannot.
Yes.
Or
No,
can.
New Zealand does.
Okay.
Okay.
Most other countries consider it unethical too.
It is unethical.
Which I
agree.
agree with,
Yeah.
because at least in nursing school, we learned that the general population has the healthcare literacy of a 5th grader. Which is understandable, because can any of you remember at all in high school or even before that learning anything about healthcare?
Something about a knee bone in there.
Yeah.
There's a knee bone.
I remember that too back in 1st grade.
Yes.
Yeah,
was a
and I
dance.
mean, until I got into nursing school, I didn't even know most of the terminology that had to do with healthcare. So, and most people don't, which is ridiculous that they would have all of these commercials that make your illness look so bad, and then make this pill that you're going to take that's going to make it look beautiful, and like you're going to have wonderful dreams and sleep perfectly from now on. And then, of course, they bring that to their doctor.
Yeah.
And their doctor sighs and says, okay, well, I guess I'll prescribe this to you since you're so adamant because you saw the Lunesta butterfly
Lunesta.
See, now that's another point, and I want to talk to you about, because like I said, you have some inside knowledge. I personally have never walked into a hospital, and I don't know of anyone who walks into the hospital and says, I think I have this. Please prescribe me this drug that I saw on this advertisement. How often does that happen?
Oh, my dear God. It happens all the time.
Really? Wow.
Oh,
see?
yes. WebMD. People
Oh, my
have
God.
it pulled up. Oh, I just read that this medication that I'm taking could cause death. So I think I don't want to take it. And this medication that they have is literally the only thing keeping them alive.
Oh, jeez.
It does happen a lot.
No, I was having a conversation with my girlfriend because we saw an advertisement for a drug that was some random drug I never even heard of for some random thing I never even heard of. And I was like, who's walking into the hospital saying, I want Lunesta or something like that? And
Right.
like,
I mean, I assume that it happens more in clinics. In the hospital, it's mainly people who have been laying in bed for a really long time obsessing over their illness, which is probably what I would be doing. And then they start to research things and they get on some .org site that has a recommendation for them about what medication they could take that's a cure-all, or an essential oil that's a cure-all.
essential oils.
Yeah.
There you
What
go.
cancer had you convinced yourself you had due to your shoulder pain?
Okay, yeah. So the backstory is I have shoulder pain. I think most people who know me, but I've been having some and it hurts, and so I went to the VA to get X-rays. But before that, WebMD, along with several other Google searches, almost all of them said you probably have a tumor in your spine or something like that. Like, it was like the worst of the worst case scenarios. Like, no one like even spoke about the fact that it could be just a tendon issue, like tendonitis or something like that. They were all like, oh, you probably have a tumor that's pressing on a nerve cluster or something. I was like, what? I was like, that sounds really bad.
It does sound bad.
To the point where I saw it so often online because it was almost mimicking exactly what my symptoms were, which was pain in the shoulder, sharp pains, dull ache, and then I was having shooting pains down to my hand with some numbing down to my hand and up to the side of my head. And it would just happen randomly. And like they were like to the T saying that you probably have like some type of tumor. Like I was like, or like a
You
growth.
did go to the doctor eventually.
I did.
You didn't,
You don't have a tumor?
No, they took x-rays of like half of my body, which was awkward but fun.
Okay.
I give a special appreciation to x-ray techs because they are no nonsense, no social skills kind of people, and I love them because they I come in, barely a word to me, stand over there, move forward a half step, and then they grab me by the shoulders and turn me just like 10 degrees to the left, stay there. Like, no
You gotta
social
love 'em.
skill. I love them because you know they don't deal with patients like ever other than when they have to get x-rays, and they're in control of that room. So a little
That's
off
fair.
topic, but
It's all on topic.
I guess it's big pharma.
It's big pharma.
But yeah, so that always makes me laugh whenever I run into them because there's no, or at least I've never ran into an x-ray tech that's sickly sweet or like bedside manner of any kind. They're just like, do this, get out.
So you're saying that when some people will actually come in and they will actually request a specific drug because they saw it on TV?
Oh, yes. And so even like, let's say diabetics come in and they need insulin to survive. But when we're in the hospital, we give them our certain brand of insulin, and it's just the one that's stocked in the hospital. And these people will say, no, the ad on television said that I can absolutely not stop taking this drug. And I'll have to explain to them, you're not stopping the drug. You're taking the exact same thing. It just has a different name. Or if I bring in a pill and it's a generic version and so it's a blue pill, the patient will go, well, why is this not the red pill that I always take? This is what I'm supposed to take. This is what my doctor prescribed. This is what I asked for. I'm going to take it forever. So, yes, definitely people will
All right.
will
and
request things based on that.
That's something I didn't know how often those ads work, but apparently
Plus,
very
that's
well.
that's a good
Yeah.
meme opportunity with Morpheus too. And the
Oh,
red
I
and
like
blue
it. I like
pills.
it. That should be our picture for this episode.
We talked about it. We don't have very high expectations of the general public.
No.
We talked about it in our first episode on advertising. How we feel like it seems weird, the things that people get suckered into because they see them on TV.
Mm-hmm.
It seems so odd to me because I'm not the kind of person that advertisements generally work on. If I see an ad for something, it will almost certainly turned me away from it because it has interrupted what I'm doing. You know what I mean? But people will actually, they think that because they saw it on TV, they must know better than a doctor.
Yeah. Or
Right.
WebMD and stuff like that.
Or
Yeah.
they looked it up themselves on WebMD, so they think they have a degree.
Right.
Right.
Which even as a nurse is frustrating. I couldn't imagine as a doctor.
That's frustrating just for me to talk about, so I can't imagine how frustrating that is actually having people clog up the system with
yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah. Well, not only
That's
that, but
ludicrous.
like how many are probably just hypochondriacs?
Yeah.
like me. I mean, I went to the doctor over something I knew was this, but because I was convinced online that there might be something more serious.
Well, it's easy to do, too. I mean, I do that with my cats. Like, whenever something's going on with my cat, I'm like, oh no, I better look this up before I take him to the vet because it's going to be at least $300. And then I'm concerned that they have cancer by the time I bring them in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I get it. I do.
that makes sense.
Advertising's pretty
Well,
good.
as soon
then.
as you figure out something's wrong, you immediately want to try and find the root of the problem. And the internet, whereas it is an incredible tool, sometimes it could be overused.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, and you really need to know where to look, too. I mean, I'll have people tell me, oh, well, so I heard about this, and I'll say, okay, well, where did you find it? And they'll show me some healthymoms.org thing that is like the reason why they believe in this. And I'm like, well, you really can't just read a forum and consider that to be fact. You need to read peer-reviewed journals or evidence-based things that have actually happened and that people have actually studied. So, I mean, if you click on a website and an advertisement instantly pops up, that's probably not the website that you should get your information from.
Yeah.
Because they're getting money off of that article.
Heck, they're
Exactly.
getting just more traffic by you clicking on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That gets them money and time, too.
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely.
that's amazing to me.
You know how money hungry people are as well.
Mothers.org. That reminds me of essential oils.
Yeah, well, Sacred Heart actually uses essential oils now, which I
Really?
think is really cool. We used to just have like a peppermint one because we're the bowel surgery floor, so it gets a little smelly. So we would use a peppermint and call it poopermint, and we would just use it to like make it smell better. But now we have some that's for anxiety, and we have some that can increase appetite. And I use it in addition to the drugs that, we offer because I don't think that it should just take over. But I do think that homeopathic remedies have a place,
Oh, yeah.
just not a place in like curing cancer or fixing spinal injuries.
I just wish we had a cure for cancer.
That would be awesome.
Well, a lot of people think that we do.
Yeah.
And that's part of the big pharma thing is that they're actually
That's
hiding
true.
it from the public because if you got the cure for it, how could people pay for years and years of treatment and medications? And that's where the money is.
It really
You'd
is.
rather have someone consistently giving you money over a period of time than giving you money and then being cured.
Well, especially since we're talking about like chemotherapy. Did we find a statistic on how much it costs?
No, I think you were the one looking it up. I
Yeah,
know they.
I couldn't
you?
find the
Did
the
you?
American Cancer Society doesn't speak anything of the cost. So and I looked online.
Well, it's a pretty ill subject.
That's true.
The cost is not what most people want to talk about.
Let's see if I can do a general search real quick. Help me, Google. How much? Oh, that's the first Google. Between 11 to 12,000 a month out of pocket costs, and that's from asbestos.com. I don't know who they are. So,
It's a .com, so it's probably a lie.
yeah. Let's see.
But you hear stories of it all the time. People that will either opt to just not go through treatment because they don't want to burden their family with the debt, or because they just straight up have no way to pay for it.
Yeah.
Couldn't even find a
Can't
way to
even
get a
imagine
loan to cover that
yeah,
sort
I
of
can't even
thing.
imagine even if this is kind of a fudged number, 10,000 a month or so.
It can.
That's half a
those
year's
numbers
salary for a
can
lot of people.
Get crazy. So, I was speaking with somebody one time who said that every single pill that they had to buy was going to be $3,000 to $5,000, and they would take that pill 3 times a week.
Jeez.
And I've seen it where a patient mixes up a medication and then something happens to that medication, like they let it sit for too long, or maybe they dropped the vial, and that one error cost them thousands of dollars just because of how much that medication costs, which is just insane to me.
Here's a little bit of statistics, and this is from asbestos.com. I don't know how well it is, but we'll talk about them at least.
We'll have to fact check this.
Yeah, we'll have to fact check it. But it says chemotherapy in 2013, last check, was cost effectiveness study. Alamita or Permatrix. I don't know how to pronounce those or what they are.
Those were vastly different pronunciations.
Well, it has
those were two things.
Don't hurt me.
Two different things.
But they reported the total cost was about $40,000 for the first line of mesothelioma treatment. The cost varies depending on the exact drugs used, how many rounds are given, and other factors. Surgery can cost for lung cancer surgery. It can cost about $40,000. And then radiation therapy in 2015, a study showed that patients with Medicare radiation for lung cancer was approximately $9,000 out of pocket. So that's all.
And that's just the out of pocket.
Yeah,
cost.
Right.
So I mean, those are big numbers when you're thinking I'm gonna possibly die. This may not even work, and I'm paying out this kind of money. And then even if I do survive, how much debt am I going to be in for the rest of my life?
Yeah. There's a lot of talk about that subject right now in the media, just about how much it costs. Specifically with insulin at the moment is a really big one. But people we don't get very political, but it's a very political thing right now. Talking about how the United States has a higher healthcare cost per individual than other countries, almost all other countries. And we don't have free healthcare, that sort of thing. We also allow companies to jack up prices on medication just for profitability.
And personal experience, I know personally that Humira is one that I've heard of. And I think per pen that they had to self-inject was like $1,500 here in the U.S., but it's $75 in Australia. But you're not allowed to purchase it overseas whatsoever, obviously for transportation purposes. But you can't go there, I guess, and get it because you're a U.S. citizen. You have to get it through the American resources, and it costs like $1,500 a pen or something like that. So
right, it costs more here than it does elsewhere.
Yeah. So that's just on your.
There's laws that govern that in other countries, and there are less laws or no laws that govern that here.
Yeah,
and I'm not quite sure where the opposing argument for that is. Like, who's arguing that, oh, well, it should cost $1,500 a dose or something like that?
I don't know.
It's the people making the money.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the only people that would argue against
it. And they get to claim whatever they want.
Right.
It costs this much for research and development of this drug. So now the main majority of the world, which is the U.S., who's the largest probably consumer of drugs, is going to have to pay for that research and development.
It's estimated that pharmaceuticals is the highest profitability business in the United States.
Yeah.
You know what's really interesting is pharmaceutical companies, they're often global. And so they look at their global earnings rather than what they earn in the United States versus Europe or somewhere else. So that's why a medication can be like 10 cents in Europe, but here it can be $60, $70. And it's because they don't really care like which country is paying more or which country is paying less. They care about the overall price that they're getting or the overall profit that they're getting from it. And something, this is just what I was reading about, so don't quote me on it, but
I don't think we've ever had anyone quote us on anything.
No, well, good.
But this is on
Nobody
record,
cite me.
so
I know, I'm a little worried.
it'll be transcribed later.
I was reading an article, though, that said there is an insurance company in Utah that will actually pay you to get on a plane and go to Tijuana, Mexico, to pick up your medications there because it's cheaper for them to give you cash, buy you a plane ticket and a ride to this clinic in Tijuana and pick up your medications there than it is for the insurance company to pay for your medications here in the States.
So the insurance company's doing it.
The actual insurance company will.
Screw that.
Yeah.
We're going to send you to another country to get your drug.
Well, that
Yeah.
makes sense from their
It
point of
does.
view.
Yeah,
If they're the ones paying for it, and that's the cheaper alternative.
Yeah, at first I thought, oh, wow, that's so special and nice that they would do that for their patients. And then I realized it's saving them like thousands of dollars anyways just to do that.
per
And they're kind of
patient,
sending the
probably.
patient on a vacation. So, yeah.
Wow, all right.
It's sad that it's come to that.
I'd really love to know like a company that's doing that. I'll get their insurance.
Right?
Yeah, they go the extra
I'll
mile.
move to Utah.
No, looking for endorsements from insurance companies.
Just in case you guys want.
We'll sponsor you guys.
Sponsor.
A lot of
Send
people
us all
think
on
that
vacation.
the insurance companies are actually in on it, though, because studies back in 2017 said that if you are a Medicaid beneficiary, you are twice as likely to get prescribed an opiate than if you are with a different company.
Oh wow, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Which, according to them, means you're 3 to 6 times more likely to get addicted to it because you're twice as likely to have it prescribed to you in the first place.
I could see Medicaid beneficiaries needing more opioids than people who weren't on Medicaid, though.
That makes sense. The people that qualify for it.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
see, could you explain a little bit about the Medicaid? Like, what's the difference between that and a standard insurance? Is Medicaid like more terminal or?
Not more terminal, but I mean, someone who's on Medicaid is either going to be older or have poorer income.
Okay.
So, I mean, someone who's able to get up and work at a job or have a high-paying job probably isn't going to have a disability that would cause them to take a bunch of opioids.
But
Whereas, like, someone on disability may have Medicaid or Medicare.
Okay.
So
yeah,
people
and
think that the drug companies are like feeding on the poorest people anyhow. That's where it comes from. And
Yeah.
so that's where the idea that Medicaid is prescribing all of these low income people opioids, you know, they get them hooked on it or whatever. That's what people believe.
I absolutely agree that insurance companies are a huge part of what jacks up the cost of healthcare.
How do they benefit from that if they're the ones paying out for it?
So they're getting a ton of money from people who are paying into them.
Yeah.
And so this is just an example. For me, I went to pick up a medication, and I use this app that tells me how much money something is going to cost if I get it out of pocket. And wherever you're picking up your medication, it's going to be a different cost according to what pharmacy you use. So I looked at that to see what I was going to get, and I ended up having my husband go and pick up the medication for me. And of course, he just used my insurance card. And I looked at what the cost was through my insurance, and the cost for my pack of pills was $35. Whereas when I looked at how much it would cost for me to take it and pay for it out of pocket, it was only $12.
So, feels like there's some type of money laundering going on there.
It
is
sure
what
does.
it feels like.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you think about it, all the people paying into these insurances, which I've always felt like insurances were like a scam anyways, because it was started pretty
You
much
need to
by
have
law.
Right.
it. And if you get caught not having it, you need to pay more for the penalty to not have it than it costs to just have it.
Exactly. So insurance that's a whole nother episode I'll probably get into about how
I know. We could
started by the mob.
I could
It's
go
mob
off right
mentality.
now,
It's a
but-
mob mentality. Hey, pay us to insure or protect you.
Protect you.
Otherwise, you're going to get hurt.
pay us because it's good for you, but if you don't do it, it's not going to be good for you.
So that, like I said, that could be its own conspiracy of circulating.
will
No, I
be.
could
Just
go off
constantly
about
I'll
that.
take
circulating
note
money.
of that. We'll talk about insurance
Yeah, we'll
agencies
talk about
eventually.
it. I just want to look up real quick the average medical debt, and this is debt.org. So, official.
It's a .org.
It's a .org.
Nonprofit is
Right.
what that means for people that don't know. .org is a nonprofit.
Exactly. So very official. They usually do a lot of the research or censuses and stuff like that.
They're not benefiting by getting traffic to their website.
Exactly.
I don't think there can be ads on a .org.
I'm fairly sure you're correct because they fall under, I forgot what org stood for, but it was something organized, something government page.
I don't
or
know,
something like
but
that.
it's nonprofit.
But it says average daily hospital costs for an American is $5,220. That's just for being seen. Average annual nursing home rate is $97,000.
Oh, that's just wrong.
That's messed up. That's almost $100,000.
Wrong as in wrong number or wrong as in...
No, I mean wrong as in it's wrong to make elderly people pay for that when they need that help.
Yeah.
So I
No,
used to work
absolutely.
in this nursing home, and it was a low-end nursing home, and I won't say which one it was, but one of the semi-private rooms, meaning there was a curtain separating the other bed in the room, cost $7,000 a month.
What the heck? Like, that's crazy. I mean, I know they're being tended
And I
to
made
by,
$9 an hour.
Oh, yeah. So
Wow.
that's another
Say
thing
that.
we could do. And Yeah. That's just insane. 2016, the total money spent that's been, publicly known is $3.3 trillion in medical debt.
Whoa.
We could pay off
Trillion.
our government's debt with that kind of money.
Yeah.
In like 2 years.
Medical business, it's like a cash money game, it seems like. Actually, just in 2018, over $114 billion was spent just in purchasing and merging pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
$114 billion.
That's a ton
And
of money.
that is one company investing in the idea of buying another company because they think that the medication they produce is going to
The
be
patents they
profitable.
hold, yeah.
If you're throwing down $50+ billion, which happens every year on mergers, you have to assume you're going to make that money back eventually.
Usually within 5 years.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
We can assume that they're going to make that money back, especially if it's a new medication, which this is really unfortunate, but we're not a free economy. So nobody can, if there's a patented medication, which a patent usually lasts about 20 years, there's not going to be another drug produced that's the same thing. So nobody can go and buy the $20 alternative. So that drug company has the option to make it cost whatever they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's not going to be any competition for however many years. And there's no laws regulating them paying generic companies to keep them quiet for a while or to give them a part of their funds and tell them, how about you just wait to release your generic medication so that we can keep making all this money?
Yeah. So the big thing is it's just one giant cash scam. It's basically one company saying, we've developed this. We can invent some reason why you need this, probably. And then from there, make ridiculous amount of money until something else comes up.
Exactly.
Since you talked about the patents and we were talking about how Monsanto is in on the pharmaceutical game, we talked about how in the mid 80s they created the seed and pesticide combo that could double the output of a crop for a farmer.
Yep.
And they held the patent on that until the early 2000s so that nobody else could produce this thing that could potentially end world hunger. They chose to keep the patent on this and continue raising the prices on it. Rather than using it for good, they opted for the route of profitability.
Yeah.
As
So
many companies do.
If that's a public known thing, it's not too hard to think a company stumbled across a particular cure, like say for cancer or HIV, and said, you know what? We're going to hold off on this for a while until we're
Well, sure, you release it and then you cure everybody, or one of the massive pharmaceuticals companies pays you out a couple $1 billion a year for the rest of your life to have that secret die with you.
I don't know too many people would be strong enough not to take
a couple $1 billion
a year.
Not that the cure for AIDS wouldn't be worth billions of dollars, but
For
would,
curing
but, like-
cancer, hopefully you would not take the $1 billion.
Yeah, but think like you cured cancer, but there's always going to be another disease or
I'm just
another
like-
issue.
at our
Like,
line of work, we deal with people who have money issues. Me and Chance do, and like I guarantee you, if you waved $1 billion in front of someone's face, and in
even
the
a million. Let's just
if you waved $15,000 in front of some of these people's faces, and in the other hand, the cure to cancer, they grab that cash.
they take it in a heartbeat.
I'm not even kidding.
99% of them. Would.
I don't.
And that's
I have pretty bleak outlooks, but like I fully believe that.
well,
just with the
most of
average
them would
people
probably
I've dealt
not even
with.
believe you have the cure for cancer.
That's true. That's not real, but that cash, that's real.
That's real.
I'm taking
and it'll
that.
set me
True.
up for the rest of my life.
$15,000.
If there is a corruption like that, I would, and I'm not saying that it isn't a possibility, I would like to know where that corruption starts, because I work with nurses, I work with nurses' aides, I work with doctors who are amazing, pharmacy techs, pharmacists, and none of them would do anything like that.
Well-
I mean, I couldn't, it's not like the lower level people are in on it. And I
No,
understand that healthcare is such a top heavy organization. So, I mean, it's not completely out of the question, but I would just want to know, like, where does that corruption happen? Who's keeping the secrets and who's educating people to not even know about these things?
I agree with you that the lower levels are kept out of it, and I think that's why people view it even as a possibility, because the idea is that the more people know about something, the harder it is to keep it a secret. And so it's something that you would have to eliminate when it was in the testing stage. Or these companies, when they'll buy out a pharmaceutical company that only has a net worth of $10 million and they'll buy them out for $50 billion. You have to imagine like what they figured out about something before someone else.
Yeah.
And gave that company $50 billion for it based off of their $1 or $2 million net.
My response to you on this one is my theory behind it, if it is happening kind of thing. One, it would be a lab clerk or someone in that kind of field to where they're doing the testing, they developing the chemicals and getting the molecules already, and then they test and go through trials and they learn it. They don't own any of that information. It's all owned by the pharmaceutical who's paying them to research it. So when one of them says, hey, I think I have the cure for cancer, there's two ways it could go down. One, kill them. I say that and it sounds joking, but there's been times in the past where people are killed because of the knowledge.
Something that they know. Yeah.
And then you destroy that research. Or two, you basically, and now this is more my personal experience in the military, when you want something to fail, you put it up against odds that are impossible to succeed, such as in a particular sense, if you want a body armor that you have personally invested money in as a general, you want that body armor because you have stock in it to succeed, but a better one comes along. You put that one through harder tests until it fails, and then you claim that is why you didn't choose that one. Not because it wasn't better, but because it failed a particular test. One small little thing could change the outcome. And that's what, in me, like you said, a top heavy, these are people who they care about their $3.3 trillion.
Right.
They never actually
see the people that work with them.
Exactly. They're going to be involved as soon as something like that gets out, or they say, because no one's going to say, I have the cure for cancer without significant amount of testing.
Right.
Once someone at the top learns of something that has potential, it wouldn't be hard to subvert it or completely squish it in its trial period of like testing.
That's true.
Yeah.
So that's just my opinion on it. So.
I have worked with nurse researchers before who are in the trial stage of medications, and at this point it's for humans, and they're just they know that it's not going to hurt them, and they're just kind of monitoring like how well it's going to help something. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, this medication works really well for adults, but it's in the trial phase because it's a different dosage because it's for a child. Okay. And it's just so regulated. There's years and years of studies and paperwork dating back all the way to the beginning of the development of this medication. It's just hard for me to imagine. And, it's all digitalized now, but of course, everything that's digitalized is then printed out and put in file cabinets in these researchers' offices. So it's just hard for me to imagine that they could actually eliminate all of it, all the evidence.
See, and that's where I don't go with the killing the person off, because that raises questions in its own,
right?
But I do, like I said, I know personally of, and I'll name the armor. It was an IOTV versus Dragon Scale armor. Dragon Scale armor was proven to be far superior with the absorption rate of the damage from a caliber bullet of 7.62 by 39. It dispersed it. It would cause minimum wounding, and it could take several rounds. But several people had invested in the IOTV system, and they literally were going to gain money from it. And then so they put it through a test to where they put it through, I think it was 156 degrees or something like that of heat to try to force it to break down. And it did. The threading that held each scale finally started to break down, and it collapsed on itself. They didn't put the IOTV through the same testing, but they didn't go with the Dragon Scale because of one tiny thing that they forced on it through the testing phase, but didn't do it for the other thing.
It's like you were saying, setting something up to fail or setting it up to succeed.
And this is something, like I said, this is military. This was to protect people's lives, and they got away with it no problem.
Wow.
So
that's wild.
Anytime there's lawsuits going on based on a medication causing a problem with somebody, it's based on the idea that people think the FDA's regulations as far as testing, they do require you to run these tests, but people say that they don't require you to run them on the specific demographic.
See, I don't know too much.
If you
about
read
that
into a lot of lawsuits, that's what it generally comes down to when the company that manufactures the drug loses, is that they did all the testing that was required, but they tested it on the demographic that would yield the best results.
I know, so I don't have a lot of experience in research, I just have a couple times where I've participated in it, but I do know, I read all of the qualifications for who was allowed to participate in it and what the disqualifications were as well, and it was very, very specific, and the patient and family had to sign it, and they had to send a thing in, and there was genetic testing involved, so... But of course, that's just in my limited experience.
But it's good experience me and Simon don't have. So
No, definitely.
It's very appreciated.
And we're not here to prove something right or prove it wrong. We just like to discuss it.
I always like to
that's a valid point.
I just like to discuss it, think outside the box.
Yeah.
When I run into a problem, or in your particular sense where you said your opinion on it, I think of how would I subvert it if I was looking for trillions of dollars worth of wealth.
If you were on the other side, right.
And like I said, and it's one of those things I'd love to get some more facts on. That's the big thing, is if there was any lawsuits where something happened where they stunted the growth of a particular type of treatment. But
yeah, that would be very interesting. It's
doubt
probably not published.
Exactly.
Right.
So
that's not the kind of thing you publish.
But I'm sure it's happened throughout history. So I mean,
I do know one thing that I think is really interesting is if you're part of a research trial for a medication, then that medication is free to you during the trial. And it's not offered to any old person who walks off the street and they're like, oh yeah, I just want to trial this drug. This drug is already proven to do some good. And so they'll say to a kid and his family, hey, we have this drug, it's still on trial, but we would like to use it for you. So they use it for them, and then let's say that drug gets approved. Once it's approved, that drug is no longer free. That drug costs a lot of money, and we know that they can choose to make it cost however much it is. So let's say this life-saving drug for a kid has been working for them, and now suddenly it costs $10,000 a month.
It's hard to get people to pay $10,000 and sign something saying it might kill you. So
yeah, which like I said, every advertisement out there, I think every one of them ends with "may kill you."
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
they have to. So say
that
the number of people that they trialed this drug on was 10,000. If one person dies during that trial, even if it's a heart attack, they have to say, well, it may have been caused by
because
the drug.
they couldn't prove it wasn't directly related to the drug. And I get that.
Which I think is really interesting.
I get it, though. They're just covering their butts lawsuit-wise in case someone tries to say. It's harder to disprove something than it is to prove something, really. So
yeah.
So that's a big one for advertising. It's just funny, antidepressants may cause depression, may kill you, that kind of stuff. So
speaking of that, that'll kind of segue me into the next thing I wanted to talk about. I think I talked to you about it a little bit. Segue. I watched that interview recently with Joe Rogan and Dr. Phil, mainly because I think Dr. Phil's awesome. But
he's a character.
He was talking about the mental illness epidemic is what he called it, the mental illness epidemic, in which all these commercials telling people that they're depressed if they've been having X symptoms, or they must have anxiety and need medications if they've had these symptoms. He personally believes that people, as well as their parents, are coming forth and choosing that they have these mental illnesses and opting for these treatments that they see on TV, and he finds it to be a really big problem in society these days, that people actually get enjoyment out of labeling themselves as having some sort of mental, psychological issue.
That's a weird thing, but you're right.
That is a weird thing. And what do you think about that?
Honestly, I believe it. I think I was telling you a little bit about my brother with the ADHD thing. So it kind of pairs up with that whole mental illness thing. Now, I will admit that the last 20 years, I think a lot of things have been tested more regularly, and there's been a lot of testing that has proven, and we catch it earlier, things like Alzheimer's and things like that. And they have that screen, I can't remember, that flashes, and it's supposed to tell them when you're a baby if you're subject to a specific disease or something.
I have no idea.
I
Sounds
know.
like some Halo stuff.
No, it's they'll put it in, and based on like eye dilation and brain activity, they can tell whether you're going to be subject to, I think it's Alzheimer's or something like that.
I have no idea.
So don't quote me on that, but I know that was a big one in the early 2000s. But my brother with ADHD in the 90s, it was every kid had ADHD. They tried to diagnose me with it, my brother with it, my sister with it. Like, it was a big thing. And basically what happened is my mom didn't want any medication for it, and she didn't go in there thinking there was a problem. He was in there for a general checkup, but the doctor said he had ADHD, and she didn't agree with him. But he pressured her and told him all these symptoms, and then basically convinced her of it. And so she put him on medication.
Even though she hadn't recognized any problem with it up till that point.
She hadn't walked in with any problems. But this was also early 90s, and she was, a younger mom at the time. So, like, and I think that kind of teeters on the whole thing with the Dr. Phil thing, too, is I think a lot of parents are so afraid of their child having problems that they allow themselves to be convinced by all this TV and advertisement, and, like, you can't look anywhere without being afraid of something happening to your child, especially with mental disorders these days. So.
That's true. With social media being bigger than it ever has been, even I, someone who never looks up anything having to do with children or really anything having to do with mental illnesses, I've seen pop-ups in my Facebook feed that are like, this Facebook quiz will tell you if your child might have ADHD.
I know, right?
It's like, don't trust some Facebook quiz.
Facebook quiz is
from
not the way
Quizora
to go.
to tell you whether or not your kid has ADHD.
I know, and that's the
And
problem.
then if you go in, maybe you can answer this. If someone comes in and they have personally decided that their child has ADHD, could they push hard enough to get a medication for it?
Well, I think if you know the symptoms for anything that you're looking to push for, you could easily go in and say, this is what's going on, this is what I think that my child has or that I have, whether it be a mental or a physical illness, and you could probably get treated for it if you find the right doctor.
Right.
Especially with mental illnesses, because mental illnesses are so often a conglomeration of signs and symptoms that we have, and they're all subjective. They're not going to be like, oh, your blood pressure is this. It's going to be like, he acts a little funny sometimes.
So
He's a
there's
little
no
hyper
blood test that you can just say, hey,
sometimes.
that's there.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
What did that comedian said? If you ever want to get Xanax, go to the doctor and tell him that you get nervous on airplanes.
Jeez.
They'll hook you up with some Xanax.
Heck, me coming back from Afghanistan, they said that we had sleeping problems, which, we were in combat for a year. Of course we have sleeping problems. But they wanted to give us Lunesta. No prescription. They were going to give it to me on the plane.
Just to like sleep,
Wow.
Yeah.
like adjust your sleep schedule, or
It was to put us to sleep on the plane so we didn't get, freaked out.
so you're not concerned when the flight is shorter than it should be because the Earth is actually flat.
Exactly.
It's a faster route, and they're just trying to
Exactly.
save gas, and it's all a big money saving.
I'm a big person who doesn't like to take medications unless I feel it's absolutely necessary.
I'm with you.
There's someone who's there's people out there a lot smarter than me that know better than me. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I've lived in my body for 32 years, and I feel like I've got a pretty good handle of it. So when I know it's time kind of thing, and I'll defer to an expert. But I'd prefer not to
Sure.
put anything in my body if I don't have to.
And I mean, there's like rejecting medications that are suggested to you, but then there's turning down sleeping pills on an airplane because you don't feel like sleeping on the airplane.
By the way, Lunesta caused about 20% of the people on the flight. It was like 20 something people out of I think there was 174 of us or something. About 20 people ended up having extremely vivid, terrible night terrors and ended up becoming violent during their sleep. So
Rough.
yeah,
Sounds like a bad plane flight.
yeah. After
Especially
coming
if you're
back from
awake.
comments. But that's, again, medication. Like I said, my brother, they convinced my mom that he had ADHD. They said that would he'd have issues learning and adapting to normal social interactions with people. And they gave her drugs. She had him on it for I think a week or something like that. And like I said, one day he was just pounding his head in a wall. And just sitting there, slowly tapping his head in the wall, and we were like, "What the heck is going on?" Like, so she took him off the drugs, and he grew up normal. You know, he's slightly antisocial, but that's because people in high
Aren't
school
we
are
all?
terrible people.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people are antisocial.
Exactly.
so-
But, you know, like that side effect, like from the drugs, because the doctor himself convinced my mom he had something because that was his opinion about it, because of he was hyper or didn't sit still well, you know, those
Right.
kind of things. So, you know, I'm not saying ADHD isn't a thing. I don't even dispute that. I'm just saying it's like you were saying, it's a mental thing. It's almost subject to a certain amount of opinion. If you have an older 86-year-old guy who's got a very hard set opinion about something and he's convinced himself of it, he's a person of authority. He could easily convince someone who doesn't know anything about it and sees a white coat that they're supposed to trust, that's how it is.
And so you were saying if someone came in and they knew the list of symptoms that they should say to the doctor, it would be no problem for them to get prescribed medication for ADHD.
I could see that happening in a clinic setting. In my post-surgical hospital setting, one area that I see that in would be like if I have a patient that comes in and he's withdrawing from alcohol or some drug, we have a set list of questions that we're supposed to ask them. Like, are you seeing things? Are you itching? Are you having auditory hallucinations? And we have to get creative with those questions because very soon they're going to memorize them all and they're going to answer them correctly to get the medication that they want. So I mean, I think easily somebody could just look up a list of symptoms online, maybe on Mayo Clinic or some sort of, you know, place that's going to tell you that you have cancer online and just list off your symptoms. And especially if it's a mental illness, that could easily just be taken in as subjective data and say, okay, well, yeah, he probably has ADHD. Let's get him on this med.
So being in the medical field, and not just talking about the people that you know in your close circle, but do you feel that people are sometimes diagnosed and prescribed medications for these mental illnesses too often?
I think, especially with mental illnesses, we are still in the Stone Age. I mean, people have been doing amputations since the dawn of time, but if you think about like psychiatric units or like any type of mental help, that's very, very recent, and mental disorders are recent because that used to be something that, you know, you just don't talk about, or if you do talk about it, you get locked in an insane asylum and maybe drenched in cold water or shocked. And just from my limited experience on psychiatric units, it just seemed very far behind.
I think that's probably the smartest thing I've ever heard about it, is that we're still in the Stone Age about it, where it's just too new to really know.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I think part of the reason that suddenly there are more people that have these mental disorders is because it's something that we're able to identify and label more so now than before.
Exactly.
But then at the same time, I think with that, I remember like in high school, and I'm not that old, I'm 23. So in high school, I remember there would be girls and guys that would like joke and laugh about it and say like, oh, I have OCD, I have ADHD, blah, blah, blah. Like it was something that made them like unique and cool. And that's not to say that it can't make you unique or make you cool, but they didn't have OCD.
Yeah,
they didn't have
a person. You don't need something like that to
right.
make you unique.
If you need a mental illness, as we've called it, to make yourself unique, maybe you have some other problems going on. Maybe you have a
Maybe
different,
that's a
a
mental
different
illness.
mental. We'll need to make a label for that mental illness. It's just, it's being delusional.
Well, I mean, up until very recently, it was totally fine to use slang terms like, oh, I'm retarded or whatever. And now, like, if you say that, that is so not okay to say to somebody. But I mean, even when we were kids, that was just like normal
That's
talk, you know,
probably
because
the
it's
hardest
funny.
habit for me,
Haha.
Rick.
But
Yeah.
nowadays, and I think like what you were saying with the medications is they're all so new. They all have such extreme side effects. Before I was a nurse and before I had my psych rotation, I could not imagine why somebody with a disorder like bipolar disorder wouldn't take their medication. I was like, well, why don't you just take your meds and be normal? Well, normal is not the same for everybody. And these people would feel completely abnormal. They wouldn't feel like themselves anymore. They couldn't have coherent thoughts. And even if they could, this medication is only somewhat effective for them. So now I completely understand why someone wouldn't want to come in, just like your brother, and take this medication.
Could be scary.
Because to them, feeling normal is living with that mental illness.
That's right.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
And yeah, for him, like I told you, he was emotionless. Like, he didn't have emotions. He didn't react to things. He didn't get happy. He didn't get sad about anything. He was just a robot.
Just how.
And then decided to put his head through a wall.
And it sounds like it was probably misprescribed to him as well. It was.
Well, like I said, my mom got pressured into it. As soon as she saw the side effects, she took him off of it, and he's never been on it, anything of the like, and she refused to have any of the other kids. We all grew up pretty normal, but that's also may not be the norm for most people. Like I said, there are people who are dealing with a serious issue and do need that help. I don't dispute that at all. I dispute Big Pharma making $3.3 trillion off of your average American.
Yeah.
Yes.
Buying out small companies for billions of dollars, obviously knowing they're going to make billions of dollars off of this medicine that they're selling for not billions of dollars.
They're not making it readily available or easy. They're saying, we get charged what we want, deal with it.
Right.
That's
I don't know how much or how it was in the 90s necessarily, like with your brother, like what laws there were, but I know now there is no way for a doctor to make money from a pharmaceutical company to like encourage their medications. Maybe it was different back then, but I know even like when I was a nurse's aide, I had sat through pharmaceutical lectures, mainly just because I wanted the free fancy dinner. But I mean, they were very realistic about it, and they explained all of the side effects and all of the benefits and where all of the research happened and where it came from. And at no point when I walked out did I see the doctors leaving with a huge duffel bag full of pills.
Yeah.
And I know now if a doctor is given a bunch of free samples, they can only give those away for free.
Oh, really?
They can't sell them.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was comforting for me to know, because I always thought, oh, well, if Big Pharma is a thing, then the pharmaceutical companies are in cahoots with the doctors and they're just selling me whatever they want to. But that's super illegal.
And I think that must be a misunderstanding for a lot of people, because anytime you look into Big Pharma, that's like the first thing that comes up is doctors having some sort of incentive for pushing these medications on people.
Well, I don't think it's directly the doctors. It's the hospital itself. The director of the hospital, who often, I think, people who own hospitals, I'm sure there are like doctors who own it, but it's often not even a doctor. It's just someone who bought the hospital and they own it and it's ran by doctors. But you gotta wonder what they're doing behind the doors.
Yeah,
when they,
that's a good point.
So that's again, like I'm actually comforted a little bit about the what you were saying about that. So at least it's not at the doctor level, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. So then you got.
I would hope not.
And like I was saying with my brother's particular doctor situation, it may have been just an older guy who mental illness and that ADHD was relatively new. I think in the early 90s, it was a relatively new diagnosis. So like he may have just been set in his ways and convinced based on certain things that he saw as symptoms or, but I think hospitals shouldn't be owned by one person. I think they should be owned by the doctors. They should all have a small stake.
That would be
in
nice.
It. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Instead of a business person only
instead
looking
of
at
someone
numbers.
who's looking at bottom dollar, like why'd you give this guy a CAT scan when obviously it costs more than what they can afford? And it's like, because we want to save someone's life.
What a world we live in if that's how it works.
Right.
I'm just saying. It'd be kind of nice to be a communal ownage of the hospital kind of thing. So
a lot of people are fighting for that. So
that'd be awesome.
You know what I mean?
So, But yeah, I mean, back to Big Pharma, not in the sense of the hospital level, but just the drug companies themselves. I know how I cannot pronounce this. It's OXYCONTIN.
OxyContin. That's the continuous release oxycodone.
And that one's from Purdue. They own the patent on that currently. And that was the one where they have lawsuits against them for purposely releasing it, not being public about the addiction rate of it, is I believe what it was. They were accused of knowing the drug could easily be ingested in ways other than patent time-released methods, and for not conducting proper clinical trials, including, I think, the FDA was actually like fining them some money too. So,
Oh, wow.
so that's one that, like, just on a drug scale, that's one example for our listeners out there. Just because I don't think we've thrown out too many facts.
No.
I could rattle off some facts really quick.
Yeah.
if we need
Let's hit up some facts.
For those people that just aren't fully convinced that it is a money game, I mentioned it earlier that over $114 billion was spent in acquiring pharmaceutical companies just last year. That's not just the U.S., that's worldwide, but that includes companies buying overseas manufacturers of drugs, and the United States does get drugs from overseas. That happens.
Yep.
The United States government has almost a dozen drug and addiction-based agencies that are supposed to control this sort of thing and regulate it for the betterment of the people, not the betterment of people's pockets. But obviously, that's not working out very well.
Yeah.
This is a really random one, but I thought it was interesting. 2017, Clay County, Kentucky.
I love them.
One of the poor, love you guys. One of the poorest places in the country, actually. They have a 10% unemployment rate, which is twice the national average, or it was at the time. They gave out 617,000 units of oxycodone and 2.2 million units of hydrocodone, which meant 140 doses for every man, woman, child, and infant in that year.
Why?
Holy moly.
What's that?
Why?
I don't know.
That's a massive amount.
Well, that's why people believe that they feed off the poor, because oftentimes if you look at these poor places, you'll find similar statistics.
144 doses.
140 doses per person in the year.
So a dose is 1 day, I'm assuming.
No, a dose.
A dose is probably just one dose. So that could be once every 4 hours, once every 6 hours.
But either way, that's assuming that every single man, woman, child, and infant baby is on either oxycodone or hydrocodone.
Yeah.
So
144 doses.
Maybe there weren't a lot of babies born in that town.
I just thought that was kind of interesting.
That is an interesting one.
Wow.
Another one, this one was from the Dr. Phil interview. He said that people are constantly being prescribed longer and longer lasting prescriptions for antidepressants. And he said people that are still taking antidepressants after the first month are twice as likely to be addicted to it at the end of the year.
I have heard that.
And the people that are still taking it 3 months in are over like 12 times as likely to be addicted to it at the end of the year and still taking it.
And see,
He was, and I'm not sure on this because I'm not educated on the subject, but he was saying that it's really supposed to be more of a short-term thing. It's something that you're supposed to take to get you out of a slump and then continue on your path. And he said it's becoming more and more of a regular thing that people take.
yeah. See, that's crazy to me because I've heard the same thing that antidepressants are supposed to be short-term, get you out of your funk, then you stop taking them. You start slow, you get to the peak of the dose or the medication to where you're taking X amount per day, then you have to decline slowly. You have to slowly weed it back out of your system, and then you go back to normal. You're not supposed to rely on it. So I've heard the same thing. So that's interesting that more and more are getting extended periods of.
Right.
So
yeah.
that's the
Take it
new
for what
addiction.
it is. Of the $114 billion that was spent purchasing pharmaceutical companies last year, over half of that was accounted for when Takeda's bought Shire, which was the first overseas purchase by Japan for $62 billion. They acquired them, merged with them at a cost of $62 billion.
Was Monsanto and Bayer yet last year, or was that this?
That was $66 billion, the Monsanto Bayer. What is that? Merger. Yeah. Johnson & Johnson, a company that a lot of people know about and might not recognize them as a pharmaceutical company because a lot of their things you can just buy on the shelf at Walmart. Talcum powder, that sort of thing, like mineral oil, all sorts of stuff you can get from Johnson & Johnson. Their revenue was $81.58 billion in 2018. A lot of money. They paid out $417 million in lawsuits due to claims that their talcum powder caused ovarian cancer when it was used for feminine hygiene. Which is something that was listed on the bottle as acceptable and is still listed on the bottle as acceptable.
Wow.
So they paid out that money, which means the lawsuit succeeded, and they determined that it was, in fact, it at least played into the ovarian cancer that these people have, and you can still buy it on the shelves and use it for that purpose.
Well, look at the numbers. How much they paid out versus how much the companies were
Right, they made
worth.
$81.58 billion in revenue. They paid out $417 million.
I think that's not even 10%, I think.
That's
not
crazy.
even 1%.
That's so much money.
Yeah, basically.
Right. And we talked about the same thing with like Roundup. There was multiple times Monsanto had to pay out people tens of millions of dollars or more.
Mm-hmm.
I think one dude got $160 million because of the lesions that broke out all over his body. And then the dude said in a meeting that it was as safe as table salt, and if they had a gallon, he would drink it right there.
Yeah.
And then they were like, we got a gallon, and he was like, well, I'm not stupid.
Oh, God.
Wow.
It's just, those numbers are like hard to imagine, even.
They are.
When you get
Yeah.
into the billions and then you get into hundreds of billions of dollars, you can't even imagine what's going on behind the scenes.
I mean, if we break it down, you got $1,300 or $1,500 on you, and someone said, "You scratched my car, you owe me $1.40."
Say, okay, no big deal.
All right,
Dealio.
Dealio. Here,
Right.
here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Actually, let me scratch your car again, just for fun. I'll give you $2.50 this time.
Wow.
So,
I also learned that in most countries, opioids can only be administered at hospitals or at specific designated pharmacies, whereas in the U.S., that is not true. If you get the prescription,
interesting.
if you get the prescription, you can actually pick it up at any pharmacy.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
But in most countries, you either have to be at the hospital or the few designated places. In that Clay County in Kentucky, there was one city that had a population of 1,500 people, and it had 11 pharmacies in it that all issued opioids.
What the heck is going on there?
It's
Road
look
trip?
it up. Look
Road
up
trip?
Wow.
any of the road trip. We're
Let's
gonna
do
go
it.
do like a remote podcast in
From
Clay
scary.
County, Kentucky. We'll just talk to people. Have you had opioids recently?
I got a buddy in Kentucky. We'll just go.
All right, cool.
So,
That sounds good to me.
oh God, that's weird.
If you look up the list of the poorest places in the country, and then look up the statistics for those places, it follows suit every single time.
Wow.
The poorest places in the country have the highest level of opioids prescribed based on the population. It just does. The highest percentage.
That reminds me of the conspiracy about CIA introducing, drugs and diseases into like the black community, which was considered at the time the poor community.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
So it's almost like a new wave of that. Like,
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals introducing massive amounts of addictive drugs to.
It's all regulated by the
poor
government.
people.
CIA is the government.
Well, NSA kind of beats them now, I think.
Sure.
It's a technological age. CIA
makes
is
sense.
old school.
I heard you speak, but I can tell that they could not hear you speak because it didn't show up. But I'm done rattling off facts here.
I love those facts.
Unless you guys have anything else that you wanted to say, I guess we can close the episode.
Yeah, I think so.
That was fun. I
Yeah.
liked having a room of people. That was kind of cool.
It's fun. It's fun, and we weren't like super fact heavy on this one. It was mostly just.
I just
talking.
wanted to talk about it.
Exactly.
It's been on my mind recently.
And we've done a couple episodes where we really have been kind of edging towards that subject anyway. So
Yep. It was
it
good.
was fun.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Again, thanks to all of our listeners and supporters. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Castbox if you're a mobile user. We're on YouTube. We also post our episodes to Facebook, Podbean, and Twitter if anybody uses Twitter. Does anybody use Twitter?
do
Not us.
A lot of people
No.
do. They just
I don't know how to.
They just don't follow us on Twitter. So
Yeah.
we'll have to find a way to change that.
Or we could just treat it like YouTube.
What do we? What do you mean? Just don't promote it? That's true. I think actually if you find our episodes on Twitter, it just brings you to our Podbean.
It does. So pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast, we're probably there. If we're not there, let us know. We'll be there.
And we'll be there. We're on Libsyn now. Is the newest one I think I applied to.
We're on places we didn't even apply to.
If
They
you
just grabbed our
Google
stuff.
NC2 Conspiracy Podcast, you will be overwhelmed with links of our content,
Simple Google search.
which is the goal. So that's awesome.
We're the first thing that pops up when you type
Leave us
that
a comment, like, subscribe. We said we'd never say that. Now we say it every single
Simon
episode.
says every day. I have not bent the knee to that.
You know, it just seems like that's what we really need. Oh, and if you go to our Patreon page, if you feel so inclined, you can donate to the cause, and you also get early access to all of our recordings. We post them on the same day that we record them, whereas, big surprise, we upload them later in the week to everything else because it gives us time to edit them and also plan for mistakes. So...
Dear God, please be a Patreon so I don't have to drink Angry Orchard again.
I like Angry Orchard,
I
actually.
want real beer.
We need better pizza, though, since we have 0 pizzas right
We
now.
have pretzels. That's pretty close.
We have pretzels, but we want pizza next time. We need more Patreons. But anyhow, thank you, Chloe, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to our other 2 guests who are here but not participating today.
But stared at us quite a bit.
They stared at us quite a bit. That was cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Episode 9.
Yeah, boy.
And then, you want to hit the space bar?